Why do we expect people to change if we never show them how to change? This is Changeability. It's real change for real people, and we keep it real simple. Today's guest, well, he's a professional conference and event MC, and he's a whole lot more. Welcome, Luke Hannan. Where does this podcast find you?
Julian, hello, welcome. I am in Sydney on Darug Nation here in Western Sydney near Parramatta. It's great to be here. Pouring down rain, bit of construction outside as well, so you might get a little bit of background noise, but things are good, mate.
We won't worry about the construction noise. We keep it real, which is, it's so important with the
Change.
Yeah, so many people get hung up about, everything having to be perfect. And it's not why people tune in. It's not why people listen to us. They don't listen and want to see how good our pictures are and how good our audio are. Yet we get it in our heads, and that, everything has to be perfect before we'll launch and actually do something. So this is great. And even though your picture's going a little wonky there, it's all good. We're going to keep it going. So give us a little thumbnail sketch of who Luke Hannan is.
Luke Hannan, well, professional MC, as you've said in your intro. And before that, however, banking and finance, a couple of decades in banking and finance, risk management, collections, lending, and fell in love. And I think I'd always loved public speaking, but then made the transition 6 years ago to hosting events, to being a professional MC, and now I do it full time. It's my full-time job.
So let's go back to young Luke Hannan, because you when you were in school, clearly, I don't know, I'm guessing from the sound of it, you didn't have professional MC and event host as, what you went to the career guidance counsellor with. You ended up in finance. So who was Luke Hannan, and where did this transformation begin?
Aren't career advisors, I think, just the biggest waste of time? Show me an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old that knows what they want to do in life, and I'll show you a career advisor that's worth it. Now, that's, of course, with respect to anyone that is a career advisor. However, I left school wanting to be a motorcycle racer and was working full-time at McDonald's. Dropped out of school halfway through year 12 and was doing three-unit maths, physics. The irony is I was terrible at English at school, and now I speak for a living, so we might come back to that. But fell into banking, kind of had a bunch of different jobs doing customer service, telemarketing, and then I discovered debt collections, which was like telemarketing, but they can't say no. And debt collection sounds very confrontational, but the magic of being a good debt collector is listening, because everyone has a story. And if you pay them the respect of listening to them without wasting a whole day listening to a sob story, but if you can connect with the person on the other end of the phone, then they are more likely to pay you than someone else, and then you do your job really well. And it's funny on that connection thing. I look at my life now as a conversationalist and someone who interviews people on stage for a living. And I think all those different things you do in your life tend to add up. This is my passion. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do now, but I discovered my calling in life at 37 years old in 2018, Thursday, the 10th of May, 2018, which we can probably come to that. So in terms of school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was working 40 hours a week at Macca's, loving it. And since then, collection, risk, decade at Citi, 8 years at Westpac, and now I do this. So I don't know, back to your original question, that I knew I wanted to do this. I think probably one final thing, like Steve Jobs says, the dots make sense looking back in hindsight. And so looking back, I love being the center of attention. Absolutely loved it. I was the kid that, come spring carnival time, would be doing a phantom call, and with 50 meters to go, a phantom call, for those listening, is you pretend you're commentating a race, a horse race, And then with 50 meters to go, I'm absolutely screaming. The teacher comes in and you can't stop with 50 meters to go, right? You've got to finish the race. And then, of course, you get kicked out. But I think I love being the center of attention. I did a speech at school, actually, and completely bombed it, which is funny. But that kid who loved being the center of attention really dovetails into what I do now. Ironically, when I'm an MC, it's not about me, but that's probably how some of schooling shaped what I do now.
See, what's interesting is that I was completely the opposite at school. I mean, I was the same as that. I always say, I did really well at school if you don't count learning. But at school, you said you were up there cheering, people on, leading the call. I was the kid down the back, just wouldn't even put my hand up in class. Yet here we both are presenting in front of people, standing on stages and in front of people. So what we can take from that is that, what I can take from that is that, our speakers aren't born that way. I think they're made. It's very much a learned skill. So if there's anyone listening who thinks that, you have to have a certain, mindset and skill set to be able to do this, you don't. But what did we both do? And this is, I know what I did to get here. There was one common thing, and it was take action. So it said I didn't know where I was going either, but all I did was knew that standing still was never, ever going to get me there. And I just have to launch off into a direction. And if it's not the right direction, well, it's all right. I can switch and start zigzagging, but as long as I'm moving forward. And it's something that I've had with my children. I've never had expectations for my children except one, and it was one rule we always had in the house. You are never standing still. You are never going backwards. You're always going forwards, and it doesn't matter the direction as long as it's forward.
I like a few things there. Never standing still and backwards is interesting. And society's moving at such a rapid pace that even if you are moving really slowly relative to everyone else, there's a chance you're sort of going back as well. But the key word you said is action. And I think that got me a lot of different places. Some trouble, but then of course action gets you into trouble, but then action gets you out of trouble as well, right? And then you learn, and you'd rather be the one that bombed it and then recovered. I think where most people, without generalizing, where most people struggle or fail is action, is go. My old coach, who we'll probably get onto in a bit, he would always say, decide, commit, and people are good at that, but it's the go. It's the action thing. And I mean, I'd love to tap your thoughts on this, right? I as an army sniper, which you are and I'm definitely not, I think I can count the number of times I've shot a weapon on one hand, literally. And so mind you, point blank on PlayStation with the handgun, like I was unbeatable on that. Like I could do one gun in each hand, and I was really good. But mind you, they're not handguns. There's no recoil. It's plastic, and they don't weigh anything, and it's a computer game. But I'd love to get your thoughts on the action word as a sniper, because is it not a case of stimulus fire? Like if there's a pepper popper, someone that pops out, like you don't have much time, and you also need to be very patient. But when it's time to go, it's time to go, right?
Yeah, that is, but that's very much training. I mean, I was not a good shot. I had barely picked up a rifle, before I ever went to the army. But what I learned is that you can be trained, and it's systematic, and it's not about doing what you think is the right thing. It's about actually following the process that someone gives you step by step.
Yeah.
And you find out if you follow that process, you can actually get good. And the other thing is that anybody can be a great shot. You start with the target 2 feet away, and then you move back to 3 feet away, to 4 to 5, and you can still hit bullseyes. And it's amazing if you follow that process, which is so many times what we do now is we just set our expectations and our goals so high, and we go for something. It's such a narrow target. We miss it by a fraction, which means we've missed it. We beat ourselves up over it. But it's just not the way anyone I know who has got really good at something, and it's like the old 10,000 hour rule. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
those who are really masterful have done that supposed 10,000 hours, which is just shorthand for sticking at it for a
Yeah.
long time and turning up.
Yeah, I'd probably, I see that slightly differently in that I'm probably my own biggest critic by far. And so for me, and I suspect there's an element of what you said in sticking at it, but I believe you need to continually strive to get better. And I think that dovetails into what you said with the kids, right? Never still, always forward. And so for me, every event I do is an opportunity to learn and get better. Because I don't think we ever arrive. I think we're always on the journey. I'm also okay with trying to bite off more than you can chew, but within reason. And I think going back to the rifle analogy, you're not going to have your first shot at 2,000 yards, right? Or 1,500 yards, which is like world-class shooting. Because you're never going to get close. You're going to lose interest. And as you say, when you go 2, 3, 4, 10, 15, 20, 50, 60, 100, you build up to it. So I think what we're saying is a line in that you do need to stretch yourself, and it's okay to start small. I guess I look at some of the gigs. I did a gig last week or the week before with Meetings and Events Australia, hosted their national conference Evolve. Now that, as an MC or as a speaker, that's a massive gig because your audience is the Australian events industry, whose full-time job it is to sit through keynote speeches and CMCs day in and day out. So if you're no good or if you're average, you're going to bomb. And I guess that's the 1,500-yard shot right there, to use the shooting analogy. That's not your first shot. And if it is, it's going to be a disaster. Number one, they won't put you on stage. And number two, 99 times out of 100, you're going to miss because you're not ready for that, because we're not ready for that. I mean, that was my 494th event as an MC, Evolve. And I look back in hindsight, and the timing was right. Could I have done it at 400? Absolutely. Could I have done it at 50? Probably not, because I didn't have the experience to do a fantastic job and to exceed the expectations of these event props. I mean, my feedback came in yesterday. It was outstanding, right? And I'm proud of that because I worked my butt off. And the process and the practice, you said, is something really interesting. No one's born a speaker. No one's born a sniper. No one's born an MC. No one's born a leader. Like, I don't subscribe to that at all. I think we're aligned on that, in that you are what you work at and what you stick at and what you take action, and be courageous. It's okay to fail. It's okay to take backward steps. It's okay to miss the shot, but you need to learn from it, adjust, have a good hard look at yourself in the mirror and say, what can I do better? What did I do good? What do I need to do more of? And then take feedback from people. Now, feedback's an interesting one. I might get your thoughts on this, because quite often someone will come up to me and say, I mean, I did an intro the other day at a charity gig. And I really took my time with this introduction because I wanted to let the words sink in. So consciously, I'm really slowing down in this introduction. And someone came up afterwards and said, gee, I wish you rushed that intro so much. I wish you'd spoken slower. And I was like, okay, took that with a grain of salt, got the footage, looked back at it and went, yeah, well, A, you're not a professional speaker. B, I respect your opinion, but C, I disagree with it, because in my professional opinion, having seen the footage and knowing what I aim for, I'm pretty confident my cadence was good. Let me pause there and get your thoughts on feedback and advice, because, gee, it's a risky business, isn't it? Everyone's got an opinion. Some are valid. Others, you've got to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it comes back to humility. I mean, any
Yeah.
time that I think that I'm not going to take or listen to somebody's feedback is the moment that I've just outgrown my my station in life, because so many times people have given me feedback, and
Yeah.
when I've stopped and really taken it on board, I went, you know what, actually, you're right, and that was a blind spot, and that's something I couldn't see. And certainly, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I agree with you. Particularly if it's feedback on skill, uh, you've got to be cautious about that, because it's the old a camel is a horse made by, designed by committee. If you have so many, inputs in, you just end up with this odd thing. You have to
Yeah.
go, a lot of the times it's better to go, thank you, I'll listen, but I'm actually not going to take it on board. I'm following a process, now. Although
Yeah.
if 20 people told you the same thing, then you go,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
maybe I should listen to that. I mean, look, it's not a perfect process, but I think that when people don't do things because they fear the kickback or the criticism,
Mm.
uh, I think that's actually arrogant, because I think that if you think that whatever you say and do is above criticism, that's arrogance. And a lot of the time, um, we say that as a protection mechanism, because I mean, I'm a people pleaser by nature. I don't like upsetting people. It hurts. The criticism used to really go deep. Now it stings.
Oh yeah.
That's all. It's a sting. As oh god, okay. So I've matured and grown, from in my ability to accept criticism. But I certainly think that I need to hear a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, yeah. My love language is words of affirmation. So hearing feedback uh, is important. Being told you did a good job, and think about our life, right? As speakers, and especially as an MC, as event profs, we're so fortunate that at the end of the day, we get a round of applause, right, in front of everyone. But I'm one person of an event that has 200 or 300 people that made the event happen. There's wait staff, there's rego staff, there's people at the desk, there's people at the AV desk, there's the event producers, there's the people that produce the website. None of those people get a round of applause. So I think we're extremely fortunate to be in the limelight, and I'm always paying it forward to those that don't get a round of applause. And mind you, some of those people would be petrified to be on stage. That's okay. They still deserve recognition and gratitude, right? Probably one last thing on feedback, which I think is funny. Probably the biggest lesson, it's a big call, isn't it? One of the biggest lessons I've learned in business is just because someone doesn't value your service doesn't mean it's not valuable. Just because someone doesn't value your service doesn't mean it's not valuable. And the reason I think that's a big one for me is because, like you, like it cuts deep and I take it personally. But I'd have a dozen clients who all take roundtables, for example, intimate lunches, which I moderate. I'd have a dozen paying top dollar who love me, who hire me, who move dates to have me hosting their events. But then one client says, "You're not worth it, mate. You're just not worth the money." And that cuts so deep. And I saw a post the other day on Insta, a guy selling pizza ovens in the US, and he's like, "Look, that person's just not your customer. They're not the right person for you." And I think being confident enough in business to just let those ones go. But back to your point, if everyone says you're not worth it, then you've got a question with building value, and you need to look at your service and your value proposition. Funny story on that, and then we might move on to something else, because there's plenty we can talk about. I love the whole changeability. So I got my feedback in from Mia Revolve. I think there was 35 pieces of feedback, and this happened to me last year as well. And one of them said Luke was too OTT, like over the top, and the rest of them loved the energy. So my brand as an MC is energy. I'm not going to shout at you all the time, but I'm also not going to put the audience to sleep. It's my job to make people's day, give them return on their investment of time. They're bestowing upon me a portion of their life, so I'm going to make sure it's energetic and it's worth it. So I've learned to shrug those off and say, because you think I'm over the top, that's actually good for me, because that's what I'm trying. Like, that's the angle I've got. Most people love it. If you find it over the top, I respect that. I'm just not your cup of tea. But that's my brand, and I'm sure I can find someone else who's a little bit more subdued who'll be great for you.
So,
But yeah, funny story.
how did you go in the world of finance and banking, where, in a sense, and I have not worked in that industry, and I guess I can only go from what I've seen in the general media and in movies on it. I mean, it's pretty much you have to stay in your lane. And someone like you, who's now ended up, standing in front of people and speaking, performing, in a sense, how was that? Was that accepted? Did you have problems and kickback, pushback from other people within your industry saying, who is this guy? Who does he think he is?
I'm very fortunate in that I grew up, I earned my stripes at Citibank. So Citi's an American bank. Their Australian franchise was the fifth biggest cards player in Australia. So they had $5 billion, and this is all APRA public information. APRA publishes the monthly banking statistics where you can see everyone's balance sheet. So check that out if you're interested. But Citi had the fifth biggest cards portfolio, but we were very lean. And by lean, I mean, I was one person later in my career managing a credit card receivable book of $1 billion with 4 different brands. And what that means is you're kind of it. And because you're it, you sort of get not it as in you're the man, but you're the only person. So if in lieu of you, there's no one. So by you're it, like you're it. There's only one person. By comparison, when I went to Westpac, their book was 10 billion, and I was managing a portion of their credit card book, the on-book bit. So obviously you apply for a credit card, that's acquisition. You manage the credit card, that's portfolio, and then they don't pay, that's collections. So at Citi, I was doing all 3. At Westpac, I was doing just that smaller piece of the pie with a team. And so back to your question, at Citi, you're sort of expected to go outside of your swim lane because you need to do all these different things. And so it was encouraged. At Westpac, and this is not better or worse, this is just different, the swim lanes are really well defined. And so moving out of your lane can be a little bit more abrasive than it would have been at Citi. Probably the last thing I'll say on that, 22 years I had the privilege of working in banking and finance. You learn the difference between a manager and a leader. And the leader is the person, in my opinion, that says, I'm going to nurture, water your proverbial flower, help you grow to heights that I could have never imagined. And if that means you taking on things I couldn't have done or that I could do, but you can do and maybe do better and learn to do better, then I'm going to help you grow and flourish. For me, that's a real important aspect of leadership, whereas a manager will keep you in your swim lane and be somewhat threatened by you and won't let you do that. I was very fortunate at Citi to have so many good leaders that pushed me outside of my comfort zone, that threw me to run training sessions, which I loved, that let me as a management associate, which is kind of like their graduate program, that I was an MA, I got on that program, thousands of applicants, and they chose 7 of us. I launched a product in front of the whole bank, so spoke in front of 1,000 people. And the manager's name, Vibha Coburn. She now works at Manulife in Singapore, an absolute legend. I said, Vibha, I would love to do this speech. She said, Luke, you can do it on one condition, that if you say yes now, you can't pull out. Like, don't bail the day before and make me do it. And I'm like, trust me, I love public speaking. This is me. And so she bestowed upon me that opportunity with the courage and the conviction that you live by the sword, you die by it. But I think she also had faith that I was going to do it. So back to your question, I think different institutions and I think different teams within institutions have their own cultures. I've been very fortunate to have great leaders who encouraged me to get out of my swim lane, and you kind of had to at Citi. And so I'm pretty lucky that I grew up there and then went to a bigger bank. And by the time I went to Westpac, I was old enough and wise enough to be able to work my networks and know when I was stepping on people's toes.
So when you're talking about that commitment, that leader you had who said that once you say yes, you cannot pull out of this, that is such a common thread with people I talk to about the ability to change, is this commitment, making decisions, because without that, there is, that's the launching pad, that's the springboard that gets you there.
100%, 100%. And again, back to the jobs thing, I mean, that speech was the highlight of my year. Most people are petrified of public speaking. I absolutely love it. Like every time I take the stage, it's like Christmas morning. I don't get nervous. I am acutely aware of the responsibility bestowed upon me as the MC. And I worry about things like audience control, or I'm thinking in the back of my mind, especially at awards nights, for example, right? It's almost impossible to control an audience at an awards night. So I'm concerned about things that can go wrong and what am I going to do if this happens and what I'm going to do if that happens. But the speaking itself doesn't make me nervous. And I guess it's looking back at all these times where I'd spoken in front of the whole bank and launched a product, where I ran training sessions and didn't want them to end. When I was doing charity gigs at Westpac, which led up to the moment where I had my epiphany, which was the real I mean, we talk changeability. That was the aha moment, which we can go into in a bit. I love those. Like that, it was dopamine plus. Like it was just a rush, and I absolutely loved it. So even now, like I had a leader say to me, his name was James Walker. He was a GE from CBA, came to Westpac, and I won a mentoring session like at an auction at a charity gig I was running with him. And he said to me, he said, Luke, he said, when you're choosing your vision and your passion, and this is after I had the epiphany. It was on the night actually. I won it, and then we met afterwards. Thursday, the 10th of May, 2018. For those of you playing at home, was the day where I had that moment. And he said, Luke, he said 3 things. He goes, what's going to keep you learning? What's going to keep you stimulated? He goes, what would you do for half the money? And I think if you asked a lot of people with a full-time job, would you come to work for half the money? They'd have some serious thinking to do. I'd host events for free. Like, I love it. And when I tell people that, they're like, right, so about that investment. But I mean, I love what I do so much. It is just a privilege and a pleasure to do what I love. So yeah, love it.
See, I mean, I absolutely adore standing on stage now and speaking to people and sharing my ideas. But my story to getting there is the polar opposite of yours. I was terrified. You said, you've always loved public speaking. I mean, I was just the classic. I was just, never even put my hand up in class. But then I spent decades as a documentary cameraman. I used to study people through the lens. You'd think I was making a video, but what I was doing was watching them and asking myself, like, where do you get the confidence to be able to stand in front of people and share your ideas? What do you know? And, and I felt excluded because I continually saw that those people who stood in the light, so to speak, were extended more opportunity than those people who stayed in the shadows. And I felt small. Like I just knew I could be playing a bigger game. And it took me decades of watching this, and finally then, finding my own point where I've got to go, well, listen, I've got to make a decision and I've got to commit here. And, if I don't want to be what is causing me so much angst, I need to actually, move forward. So, it's just really interesting. But here we are, we both do it, and I love it now. So, journeys are very different.
Totally different. And then, make no mistake, I don't take a moment on stage for granted. As much as I love it, the pre-work that goes into an event is astounding. Like for me, 85 to 90% of the work that I'll do in a conference happens before I take the stage. Evolve, the 2-day conference plus the awards night, my run sheet was 123 pages of custom written notes by me for every speaker, for every session. I had a 5-minute monologue that I did at the start of day one and again at the start of the awards night, which I rehearsed off by heart and delivered off by heart. And I mean, I must have gone through that. There was probably 7 or 8 iterations of it. And then you write it once. And I mean, I'm writing one at the moment for a gig I'm doing later this month. I've written it. That's the first iteration. As I'm rehearsing it, I refine it. I must have rehearsed that when it was done 200 or 300 times, including half a dozen times at the venue the day before. And that's interesting. If you ever need to present on stage and it petrifies you, and there's scales of petrification, so I don't think that's the right word, but let's just roll with it. At one end, you've got vasoconstriction, you're about to pass out. For those people, my recommendation as a coach and as a now professional speaker is graduated exposure. I mean, that person needs to start by just looking at a photo of a stage and then getting sort of comfortable with that, and then maybe going to a venue, and then maybe at morning tea or lunch when they're not even speaking, just walking to the stage, and then maybe getting on stage and sitting on stage in an empty room, and then maybe going on a panel. And that's a journey and a half, right? At the other end of the scale, someone that's just a worrywart or worries about things, my risk management comes in, and I say, well, and try this for anyone listening, draw a graph with 2 axes. On one axis, put the likelihood of it happening. On the other, put the actual impact if it does. And then graph all the things you're worried about. forgetting what I say, someone laughing at me, getting heckled, tripping over on stage. And you'll find most of them are down here in the corner, low likelihood. And if they do happen, low impact. Probably one final piece of advice on that is, if you're on stage, anyone listening, when you're presenting or if you're on stage and you forget what to say, in that moment, you are the only person on earth that knows you've forgotten. You're the only person on earth that knows you've stumbled on your words, or that you've gone down the wrong track, or that you presented the wrong slide first, or that the slides are in the wrong order. No one in the audience has any idea. So never admit it. You don't need to say, I'm so sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm so sorry, that's in the wrong order. If you go blank, think, pause, and reflect. Just say to the audience, I know that's a lot of information. Let's pause and reflect. Let's take a moment to digest. Because think, you need time to get back on track. Cut them loose quietly. Invite them to think about what you've just said. And then you've cut them loose. The pressure's off. Walk back to the lectern, grab a glass of water, flick through your notes casually, and then you're back on. It'll be the most engaging thing ever, and it'll come from an actual error. Remember, pause and reflect, and you're the only person that knows you've made a mistake. Let me pause there. I can talk all day. I love communication.
When I was a professional magician for about 5 years, but in the world of magic, we used to have a term for that, and it's why run when no one's chasing. And you'd think that you had messed up a move, but no one knows. No one knows. So, you can take this in any direction, but as soon as you do start to worry about that, you telegraph it to people. They can, humans are brilliant. We just have this wonderful built-in bullshit radar and detector. And they, as soon as you get tense about that, it just little signals start going off everywhere. So, and you said something there, and I was going to segue into it, and now I've lost my train of thought on that.
Let me talk about the epiphany. People ask me, how did you become a professional MC? So my background was risk management. I was the person writing SAS code, designing rules and policies, and then I've gone to speaking on stage. Now, risk managers in general are reasonably introverted. They tend to be the people that are at the back of the room and don't want to put their hands up. And for all the extroverts, one of which I am out there, when you are in meetings with all sorts of people, including introverted people, remember this: silence is time for them to think. And I say them with respect. Introverted people use silence as time to process, time to think. Extroverted people tend to think silence is time for them to speak, and they need to fill the gap. So if you are chairing a meeting, then and you're going to pause, let it hang. There's nothing wrong with a bit of silence, And if you know someone's really introverted, maybe pass to them in general and say, don't single them out, but say, Rob, Richard, John, and Jan, I know you've usually got great things to say. I'd love to get your thoughts if you're comfortable sharing something. And then just sit back and make it a safe space. Now, on the epiphany, so how did I become an MC? I sort of touched on it. I did a leadership course with a chap who was my coach after that for a while in March 2018. And it was leading for leaders, and obviously I had a team of risk managers at Westpac. And he comes up to me at afternoon tea. He goes, mate, what are you doing in risk? And it wasn't a challenge or critique. It was, I see so much potential in you, but what are you doing there? And I'd been in banking for 17 years. Waking up is a privilege, right? So I love my job. It was a privilege to have a job, and I love what I did. But I knew it wasn't for me. You kind of had that feeling inside that, changeability. Something inside me was going, this is not your pathway, mate. You love it, you're enjoying it, but this is not, this wasn't his or her plan for you, whichever way you believe. And so I left there thinking, wow, I don't know what I'm going to do next, but whatever it is going to be awesome. So Thursday, the 10th of May, and we've spoken about that date already, I'm on stage doing a charity gig for Westpac. It was for the San Filippo Children's Foundation. I'd done it for 2 years before. It wasn't a professional MC. I was just the guy in risk who loves talking. So when someone in risk likes presenting and someone needs to present, you're kind of it. Like, you're the only person that loves it, which was great for me because I loved it. So I'm on stage halfway through the night, and the thought comes into my head, Julian, as clear as I'm speaking to you now, this is it. like, this is what I'm supposed to do in life, right? And I had an MBA from UTS at that stage. I'd been in banking, as I said, for 17 years. So that weekend, I registered a business name, started building a website, went out to everyone I'd volunteered for, and this is the change journey now. Went out to everyone I'd volunteered for, got as many photos and testimonials as I could, and then, mate, just started grinding. I was also acutely aware of what I wanted to do as an MC, because everyone will say, you should do this, you should do weddings. But think about wedding MC and corporate MC. Wedding MC, entertain a crowd. Corporate MC, interview CEOs. I'd presented to APRA, to ASIC, to regulators, to boards, to CEOs, to executive teams in my banking career. That gives me a competitive advantage against some entertainer, because the entertainer can't jump on stage, more often than not, and interview a CEO or a risk manager or a head of whatever on their level. But I could. And so I knew that was my competitive advantage. Whereas in terms of a wedding, I don't have that competitive advantage. And so I steered well away from weddings. I've done two, so 497 events, 2 weddings. And they were for friends that said, hey, mate, can you do my wedding? And make no mistake, it's not easy. Like, it is self-employment and change. It's a grind. It's a grind, you know, and you'd know this as a speaker. There are so many people out there with amazing stories. What makes you different? And so for me, it was my approach, the preparation, because I did project management in later life, and every event's a project. And as the MC, you need to be quite fastidious in terms of timing and organization and leave nothing to chance. So I guess all of these skills dovetailed into this person that I am. And skill stacking is an interesting thing, right? I think it was Gilbert, the cartoonist, said, you know what? I'm not the funniest comedian and I'm not the best drawer, but I'm a decent drawer and I'm a pretty funny guy. When you put those two things on top of each other, you get a pretty formidable cartoonist. I'm not the best public speaker. I hold my own and I'm pretty good. I'm always improving. Am I the most experienced interviewer? No. Am I the best project manager? No. But I'm fastidiously organized, great on stage. I'm always learning, quite personable and can speak to people. And so when you overlay these things on top of each other, it's a recipe for a great MC. And it takes time, and I'm always growing, but that's kind of the journey, and that's sort of my approach.
Yeah, the thing I wanted to mention earlier was that you were saying that you look like the classic duck on top of the water when you're on stage, just gliding along, but underneath the legs are going like crazy. And it's the
Mate.
amount of actual work it takes to be good. Like, so, in my
The iceberg,
content
right?
that I deliver on stage, like it's 45 minutes, but it is 10 years of constant thinking and
Oh, yeah.
rewriting, and it like, I'm talking tens of thousands of hours just to deliver that 45 minutes. You keep talking while I get rid of my low power mode.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I mean, you had a really interesting guest on the other week where he was so gracious to share his speaking fees. And I think that's the lure, isn't it? People see these speaking fees, they don't see the 10, 20, 30 years of experience, the failures, the heartaches, the free gigs, the lessons. And as a keynote speaker, think about, like, how fortunate am I as an MC? I'm lucky to host the same events each and every year. My monologue changes, my intros to the speaker change, but I'm the common theme there. As a keynote speaker, and I'd love your thoughts on this. I mean, Kevin Hart said this, right, which fascinated me. So Kevin Hart tours only every 2 years. And the reason he tours every 2 years is because it takes 2 years to develop the new material. And he starts in clubs, 10, 20 people. If it's good, he'll take it to a bigger club of 100 people. If it doesn't land well, he'll take it back and refine it and then go back to 100. Once he lands it at 100, he might go to a small theatre of 500 and then he'll refine it again, 100, 500. Then when it works at 500, he might go to 2,000. And then at 2,000, once he's nailed it, then he takes it on a world tour. Then he puts it on Netflix, then that material's gone. He needs to come back with a whole new mindset again. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this as a keynote speaker, because it fascinates me. I guess you have a nucleus, but you do need to continuously evolve with the times and reinvent your messaging, right?
Yeah, you do. I mean, I'll go back even before a keynote speaker was when I was a magician. So I was a kids and family entertainer, and I did 2,000 shows. And
Wow.
yeah, and so after you've done a couple of hundred shows, the muscle memory. kicks in.
Yeah.
And so now you can just start going and you're performing, and then you're starting to think, oh yeah, what do I have to pick up on the way home at the
Unconscious
supermarket?
competence.
You know, you can
Yeah.
actually do that because the muscle memory takes over. But then what that enables you to do is actually get out of your body and stand up in the corner of the stage and look at you and
Yep.
the audience, and then go, how are they reacting now? If I just change this one word, let me just swap the phrasing on this,
Mm.
and just little bit by little bit, you realize that little tweaks can sometimes generate massive results and
Mm.
audience
Mm.
appreciation out of that. So the process is just get as much stage time as you can. And for me, I don't change my message that much, because I've spent, like I said, 10 years thinking about
Mm.
this. I've actually done the arguing in my head and with other
Mm. Mm.
people to strengthen my message.
Mm.
This has got bones. This is foundationally strong.
Yep.
Now, what I want to do is take that out on stage, make these small tweaks. But the reason I don't want to change it is because I want to be sellable to event bookers. And event bookers
Mhm.
want that security, that they know that what I saw you give at that event, I
Mm.
want
Mm.
that for our people. I don't want something different, because if you do something different, it might
Yeah.
not go down well there. So I'm very
Yeah.
much for the core of mine doesn't change
Yeah.
much
The
at all.
nucleus. Yeah, and I think we touched upon that. The nucleus is quite fixed, and as you say, you might make little tweaks. The unconscious competent thing is really interesting, and for me, that happened in COVID. So I started hosting in 2018, and of course, everyone knows early 2020 the world changed considerably. My world changed online. Everything went online, and the number of events went through the roof because all of a sudden I could host 2 or 3 or 4 virtual roundtables. I did 5 one day from home here in the studio in a row. And there was one time, I'll always remember, I don't remember the day, but I remember walking in and I'd been doing something with the kids, and I threw my suit on, I threw my tie on, and then I was like, clearly the prep work had been done. But before then, it had always had to be effort, really projecting into the camera, 100% focus. And then it was just, hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining to this such and such. And it was almost this third person where I was listening to myself say that, not thinking about it. It just happened. And I was like, ooh, ooh, that's, as you say, nerve or muscle memory. It's unconscious competence, right? It's like driving a car. Most of us don't think about indicating or putting the clutch in when you change gears, or even like I race, not very well, but I race. You know, if you have to correct a slide, it just happens. You don't think about it. You just do it because you feel your body feels the car go before your eyes see it, because your bum moves first, right? Because you're in the seat, and then you do it. The duck thing's also fascinating as well, and a lot of people don't see this, but when you're on stage, there is so much happening. There is so much happening outside of the words and the gestures that I'm saying. It's timing. It's what's the audience doing. It's how many phones are out. You know, I heard someone at a recent conference say there's a new AI technology which you put a camera on stage and it can give you an idea of audience engagement by saying, you know, how many eyes are down in phones, how many eyes are up. I mean, at a high level, that kind of works, and it would be good. Obviously, if you ask everyone to get their phone out and put a response in a poll, it's going to say they're disengaged. But I suspect you could code that out. But as speakers and as a magician as well as a performer, you're constantly assessing. Probably one final point on this, which is fascinating for me. We assess. This information comes in real time, but you're live. And by live, you're on stage, it's happening. And so you sort of assess it, and then you make changes on the fly, and then you move on. I got a photo from a guy called Paul Benjamin, an amazing photographer I'm actually working with in a few weeks again. And he got a photo of this audience member during my monologue at the start, and she actually came up to me at the break and said, "That was amazing. Oh my God, I can't believe you did that. I was gobsmacked. That was amazing." After the event, I saw the photo, and her face was just like she was just amazed. And it was weird. And I wonder if you've ever done this as a magician or even as a speaker. If you've had a look at photos after the event, when you've got time to sit back and just go, I did that. Like, and really not get stuck on it, but in real time, you see someone's amazed, you know you're getting great contact, the audience is engaged, you can see that, you move on. But after the event, when you've got time to look at that photo and reflect and go, wow, like I had that effect on someone. It was just profound. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to look at photos of your audience or people that
Yeah,
you've performed.
I used to
It's a
chase
real
photos, audience
yeah,
reaction photos. I mean, they're so good for,
yeah.
in our business for your website. So yeah. I mean, look, I've certainly looked at that. But you're talking about reading the audience. I
Oh yeah.
grew up in my stage career started with the toughest of audiences, and that was kids' audiences because kids, if they don't like you, they don't sit there and cross their arms and
They're
go on their
gone.
phone. They just
They're
leave.
gone.
And
Yeah.
once one leaves, the others go, "Oh, where are they going?" And it is like it is tough. And the other thing about audiences too, about reading audiences, is that you can give one performance, and this is both magic shows and also as a keynote
Mm,
speaker.
mm,
You can give one audience where everyone's into it and they're smiling, they're engaged, and you get a standing ovation at the end. The next day, you deliver what you consider is exactly the same performance, and the audience is like this.
yeah.
And you go, "Oh, what have I done?" And you question yourself, yet you'll walk off the stage and you'll be walking around in the foyer, and someone will come up from this audience who had their arms crossed and go, "That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen." And you
Yeah.
go, huh? And you start to learn that people express their
Mm,
their engagement and their appreciation in different ways. And I've heard comedians speak about this, that with comedy, is that some people are just out loud laughers, oh,
mm,
belly laughers, and other people will go, "Oh, that was really funny." They'll literally say, "Oh, that was really funny." That's how
mm.
they express their engagement. So it's very, very hard to really gauge what an audience is taking from your
Mm,
presentation.
mm. There's something we talk about in our communications coaching that I do around decoding messages, and it's interesting when you say, "Oh, that was really funny." Now, that person is encoding that message with humor, with joy, with happiness because it was really funny. But it's so easy for us to decode that and go, "Oh, that was a bit sarcastic. Maybe I bombed." And so you've hit the nail on the head. Sometimes on stage the lights are so bright you just can't see anyway, and then you're just hoping for the best, right? So there's not much you can do in those situations. However, feedback is a fascinating one, and I think it's important to take it. But to your point, one of the things I always think about before I jump on stage is like, what does this room feel like? Like, and for me, public speaking is like playing a piece of music, in that you need to take the audience on a bit of a journey. You can't just go zero to hero straight away. In most cases, I mean, if you're commentating the X Games, or I commentated Ironman, the triathlon at Port Macquarie, that you just lose your marbles on the mic the whole time because everyone's pumped up. Like, the whole atmosphere of that place is energy, is excitement, is people doing their PB. So whenever I took the mic, it'd be like, oh, I commentated when someone came back. It's in my showreel. It's an old showreel. His name was Kevin. I was like, "Kevin Bloomfield, welcome back to transition." After, like, you just lose your marbles, and it makes sense because you've just got that feel. There's real energy in the air. Sometimes I'll go to a conference, a finance conference, or an energy conference, or a government conference, and I need to work really, really hard to earn their respect in a few minutes, bring them on the journey, bring them up. And even then, sometimes I don't go for that massive, energetic round of applause, crack on, open, because what I don't want it to do is I don't want it to bomb. And it's not that I'm not taking the risk, it's that my job is to get the audience up a little bit above average and then keep them there all day. If I try and raise them too high and then lose their respect and it tanks early on, kind of like a keynote speaker cracking a joke to break the ice when they really shouldn't, uh, you just can't get them back. So I'm constantly sort of thinking about the feeling for the room. Interesting one on jokes. Risk reward. So again, senior risk manager way back in the day. In life, you can't generally get a reward without taking risk. But you can take risk for little or no reward. So you can't get reward without taking risk, generally speaking, but you can take risk for little or no reward. So I would urge each and every one of you, consider the risk-reward ratio of cracking a joke at the start of your prezzo. Because if it bombs and you did it for no reason, it's going to be really hard to get the audience back. On the other hand, an example of when it does work, I coached a guy once who had a really thick Scottish accent. So he cracked a joke about subtitles. Now, the joke was funny, but it wasn't supposed to be funny. It was supposed to put the audience on notice that I'm going to be difficult to understand. You need to listen up. So think about the risk-reward ratio of humour. And if you're doing it to break the ice, say something thought-provoking instead. 9 times out of 10, that will be better.
Luke, that's a solid place to end. If people want to connect with you and learn more, where can they go?
lukehannan.com.au. Drop me a note on LinkedIn as well. Would love you to follow the company page there. I share speaking tips, and Instagram at LukeHannanMC. I'm growing that too, where I share speaking tips each and every week. But yeah, reach out anytime. Happy to have a chat, chew the fat, or talk about your next event or your communication challenges.
Thanks, Luke. Let's come back and do it another time.
Would be delighted to, Julian. Thank you.